terrible news of the death of Robin Williams. A statement from his wife confirming his death alludes to his battle with depression, and now we know why.
Everyone thinks they know how Robin Williams died. They're wrong. For years, his daughter Zelda kept a secret about what was actually destroying her father's brain. And it wasn't just depression. It was a medical ghost that even his doctors missed until it was too late. Today, we're stepping behind the closed doors of his final months to reveal the nightmare Robin was desperately trying to hide from the world. To understand the truth Zelda finally revealed, we need to rewind to the day the unthinkable happened. The final days. On August 11th, 2014, the world lost one of its greatest comedians and actors, Robin Williams, at 63. The man who brought laughter and unforgettable characters into countless homes across the United States, passed away at his home in Paradise Cay, Tiburon, California. Now, when the news first came out, many reports claimed he ended it all due to depression. And for a lot of fans, that was hard to understand. Many kept wondering how someone so full of life, someone who made the whole world laugh, was dealing with something that dark. Well, it just goes to show that there are always parts of a person's life we don't get to see, especially public figures. We see the smiles, the red carpet, and the applause, but we do not always get to see the quiet moments, the struggles, or the things they choose to keep private. Now, in the months leading up to his passing, Robin had been quietly struggling with his health.
Now his widow says the actor and comedian was battling another disease.
As he struggled with his own battles of depression, anxiety, as well as early stages of Parkinson's disease.
He had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease just a few months back, and even though he tried to keep up his usual energy, small changes started to show. This was the start of the medical ghost, the invisible enemy Robin couldn't name. He was fighting for his life, but he was swinging at a shadow, while the real threat stayed hidden in the dark. He wasn't just losing his mind, he was also losing his reality. Imagine being the funniest man on earth, but suddenly, you can't remember how to walk through a door or recognize your own reflection. In fact, there were reports of insomnia, tremors, and moments of anxiety that seemed to come and go. At times, it even became difficult for him to stay as sharp as he once was, with occasional struggles to keep up in ways that must have been frustrating for someone like him. So when the news broke, it trended almost instantly. Within minutes, it was everywhere online. Before long, the tributes started pouring in. Social media was filled with clips from his movies and stand-up performances. People shared their favorite moments, their favorite lines, and the memories they had of watching him over the years. His colleagues also sent their heartfelt tribute. Many of them talked about his kindness, his generosity, and the way he made everyone feel seen. Even Barack Obama paid tribute, calling him one of a kind and reminding the world just how much of an impact he had made. But here is the part that many people did not see. Robin's final days were much quieter than the headlines made them seem. He had always used humor to connect with people, to make them feel good. But at the same time, he kept a lot of his struggles to himself. And because of that, his family and close friends felt this loss in a very different way. They were not just mourning the man the world knew. They were also trying to make sense of things that, looking back, did not fully add up. Some signs were easy to miss at the time and only became clearer after he was gone. Back then, Parkinson's diagnosis seemed to explain what was happening. It gave people something simple to hold on to. But as time went on, it became clear that it did not explain everything. And the autopsy result later confirmed this suspicion. It revealed a heartbreaking brain disease. So while the world mourned an icon, others began going back to the very beginning, trying to understand what shaped him and what he may have been dealing with behind the scenes. Because the more people looked, the more it felt like there were pieces of his story that had gone unnoticed for years. To understand why Robin was able to hide a terminal brain disease from the entire world, we have to look at the boy who learned to use humor as a shield long before he ever stepped on a stage. The lonely boy behind the laugh. Yes, Robin Williams made the whole world laugh, but what many people never realized is that his talent didn't exactly come from a place of happiness. It started in a quiet, lonely house in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, where he spent most of his childhood alone. Born in 1951 in Chicago, Illinois, to many, his life looked perfect. He lived in a big house, his family was wealthy, and his neighborhood was calm. But behind those walls, things were very different from how they seemed. His father, Robert Williams, worked long hours at Ford, and his mother, Laura McLaren, a former model, was often out at social events. Even though they cared for him, their busy lives made it difficult to shower Robin with attention. And this kind of loneliness can sometimes shape a child in ways most people never notice. Now, instead of Robin running around with other kids, he decided to create his own world. He invented voices, created entire characters, and held conversations with people who didn't exist. For him, it wasn't just imagination. It was a survival technique to deal with his lonely life. And, in a way, that was how it all started. One of the few people who really noticed him was the family maid, and sometimes his mother. They listened to his stories, laughed at his jokes, and gave him the attention he had been craving. To anyone else, it might have seemed like nothing, but to Robin, it meant everything. In those moments, he realized something important. He loved making people laugh. He realized that laughter could connect him to others in a way nothing else could. This realization planted a seed that would grow into the driving force behind everything he did. Eventually, his father retired, and the family moved to California. Robin was 16, and starting at a new school made things awkward for him at first. He was shy, but before long, he began coming out of his shell. Here's the thing. The school in California was different from the one in Michigan. The schools were more relaxed, the students more open, and people laughed easily. He realized he could be loud and silly, and just be himself. He discovered that making people laugh made it easier to connect. It helped him make friends. It gave him a kind of confidence he did not have before. And little by little, that quiet boy began to transform. By the time he reached high school, Robin had already started standing out. He was not just funny, he was different. His mind moved quickly. He could switch voices, create characters, and react in ways that caught people off guard. And interestingly, he doesn't force it. It just came to him naturally. In fact, by the time Robin graduated, he was already known as the funniest kid in school. Humor had become both his way to connect and his shield. While others laughed at his jokes, no one asked how he really felt. Still, he kept performing, experimenting with voices and characters, and shaping his imagination into something unique at such a young age. After high school, Robin enrolled at Claremont College and tried studying political science. At first, it seemed like the right choice, but almost immediately, he felt restless. The lectures didn't excite him. What he really wanted was connection. He wanted to move people, make them laugh, and make them feel something real. He eventually left political science behind to pursue theater at the College of Marin in California. To him, comedy was no longer just a talent. It had become a calling he could not ignore. And just as Robin was finding his voice, something bigger was waiting. A place where his restless energy, wild imagination, and endless humor would meet structure, and the world would finally notice. The Juilliard years and breakthrough. In 1973, Robin took a big step. He left California and moved to New York after getting a full scholarship to the Juilliard School, one of the best acting schools in the world. But here's the thing. Juilliard was strict. Everything there was about control, practice, and doing things the right way. Students spent hours working on Shakespeare, training their voices, and learning how to move on stage. It was very different from the way Robin naturally expressed himself. From the beginning, he stood out. While other students stayed calm and followed the rules, Robin's mind moved fast. He jumped between voices, switched ideas quickly, and filled the room with energy. So naturally, people were drawn to him. And in the middle of all that, he found one person he could truly connect with, a fellow student named Christopher Reeve. The two became close, and in many ways, that friendship gave Robin a sense of balance in a place where he often felt out of place. But even with that, there were still moments when he quietly wondered if he really fit in. His style obviously didn't really fit the system around him. Juilliard focused on structure and control, while Robin's talent was fast, loose, and unpredictable. And of course, this difference didn't go unnoticed. One of his instructors, John Houseman, reportedly saw it early on. Instead of trying to force Robin into a box, he understood something important, that this kind of energy could not be contained in the usual way. Whenever Robin performed, he brought scenes to life in a way that surprised people. And as that kept happening, his confidence slowly began to grow. Still, Juilliard was not easy. The training was tough and demanded time and concentration, so Robin had to learn how to control his energy. He began to understand when to slow down and when to let it out. For the first time, he wasn't just being funny without thinking. Instead, he was learning how to use his talent in a more focused and meaningful way. At the same time, he didn't lose what made him different. He found a way to blend what Juilliard was teaching him with his own style, so he could follow structure and still stay unpredictable. And this balance made him stand out even more. By the time Robin left Juilliard, he had changed. He was no longer just a funny kid with a wild imagination. Now, he had discipline, skill, and a style that felt real. So when he stepped into the New York comedy scene, people noticed him right away. His energy, his speed, and the way he could become so many different characters felt new, exciting, and impossible to ignore. Before long, word started to spread in comedy clubs across New York. Robin didn't just perform, he owned the room. One moment, he was doing voices. The next, he was jumping into completely different characters, moving so fast it almost felt like his mind was racing ahead of him. Viewers never knew what was coming next, and that unpredictability made it thrilling. People couldn't stop talking about how good he was, and soon directors and producers began paying attention. One of the most defining moments came when Robin auditioned for Happy Days. He didn't play it safe. He completely turned the room upside down. At one point, he even sat on his head while performing, and everyone in the room couldn't stop laughing. That audition caught the attention of the producers and led to something even bigger. The role of an alien named Mork in Mork and Mindy, a spin-off from Happy Days. Once viewers saw him as Mork, they couldn't get enough. The show quickly became a hit, and almost overnight, Robin went from being a rising performer to a household name. It didn't stop there. Hollywood also came calling, and Robin stepped into acting with the same fearless energy he brought to the stage. Now, here's the truth. Only a few talented actors can also be great comedians, and only a few comedians can truly act. But Robin Williams did both effortlessly. Movies like Popeye, Good Morning Vietnam, and Dead Poets Society cemented his place in the industry. His role in Good Morning Vietnam earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor and a Golden Globe win.
For Best Performance by an Actor in a Motion Picture, Musical, or Comedy, the nominees are...
And Robin Williams for Good Morning Vietnam.
And the winner is... Robin Williams for Good Morning Vietnam.
And just like that, people started seeing Robin Williams differently. He was no longer just the wild, fast-talking comedian. There was something deeper going on, something audiences were only beginning to understand. And if there were still any doubts about his talent, his role in Dead Poets Society erased them completely. His portrayal of an inspiring teacher was quiet, controlled, and deeply emotional. By the end of the decade, Robin was not just famous, he had become a cultural force. Critics admired him, audiences connected with him, and the industry recognized that he was bringing something rare and unforgettable. But while Robin was becoming a global star on stage, an unsettling reality was hitting him behind the scenes that even his closest friends didn't see coming. Personal life and struggles. You see, most people find it hard to believe that a man as talented and successful as Robin Williams could be battling depression. After all, this was the same man who made the whole world laugh. Because of that, it was easy to believe his life was perfect. But the truth is very different. For many years, Robin quietly battled depression and anxiety. These were not just mood swings that came and went. They stayed with him, and at times, they were overwhelming. And as time went on, He looked for ways to cope with these feelings, and like many people in his position, he turned to substances. Now, back in the 70s, substance use was common in the entertainment world. The pace was fast, and the pressure never seemed to stop. So many performers relied on it just to keep going. Robin used it to match his energy, deliver his jokes, and keep up with the constant demands of performing, even on days when he did not feel like himself. Because of this, he often seemed unstoppable. But beneath all that energy, small cracks were beginning to form, and only a few people noticed them. Then, something happened that changed everything. One of his closest friends, John Belushi, passed away from a substance overdose. What made it even more painful was that Robin had been with him just hours before it happened. That moment stayed with him. He could not shake it off, and it forced him to take a hard look at his own life and the choices he was making. After that, Robin made a serious decision to change. He stepped away from substances and focused on getting better. For nearly 20 years, he stayed clean. During that time, he showed that even though he made the world laugh, he was strong enough to face his own struggles in private. But the truth is, those struggles never fully disappeared. In 2006, he relapsed and checked into rehab, facing the same battles he had worked so hard to overcome. Through it all, his family and friends stood by him. They showed him love, patience, and support as he tried to balance his public life with his private struggles. Even at the height of his career, Robin never stopped leaning on the people who truly mattered. One friendship that lasted a lifetime was his bond with Christopher Reeve. They had been inseparable ever since they met at Juilliard. Their bond wasn't just about laughter or shared classes. It became a safe place, a way to face life's challenges together. In 1995, Christopher suffered a terrible horseback riding accident that left him paralyzed. Robin didn't hesitate. He went straight to his friend's side, determined to lift him the only way he knew how, through laughter. He disguised himself as a boisterous Russian doctor and barged into Reeve's hospital room, performing the most ridiculous examination anyone could imagine. Reeve later said it was the first time he had laughed since the accident, a moment that brought light back into the darkness.
Tonight we turn to a moment, a piece of video we discovered today in a pact between a very young Robin Williams and Christopher Reeve, dear friends from acting school. ABC's Barbara Walters tonight with that moment in the hospital room.
And even though he was going through his own battles, he always showed up for others. And this brings us to another part of his life that was just as complicated as those struggles, his relationships. For Robin, love was not always simple. His relationships, much like the characters he played, had their ups and downs, and they revealed a side of him the public rarely saw. His first marriage was to Valerie Velarde in 1978, and together they had a son, Zachary. In the beginning, everything felt beautiful and full of promise. Robin was young, full of life, and deeply in love. But as his career grew, so did the pressure around him. The demands of fame, along with his personal struggles, slowly made things more difficult. There were moments of real happiness, but there were also times when his inner battles created distance between them. In the end, the marriage could not hold, and they went their separate ways. After that, Robin found love again with Marcia Garces, who had worked as a nanny for his son. Their relationship drew a lot of public attention in the early years, and many people had opinions about it, but they chose to focus on building a life together. Marcia became the mother of their two children, Zelda and Cody, and she brought stability into Robin's life. She was someone he could rely on, and someone who understood him on a deeper level. Together, they built a home filled with laughter and family moments. But even with that strong foundation, Robin's struggles were still there in the background. Over time, those challenges affected their relationship, and after more than 20 years together, they eventually divorced. Later in life, Robin married Susan Schneider. She stood by him in his final years and supported him through some of his most difficult moments. With Susan, people began to see a calmer and more reflective side of him. He seemed more at peace, as though he were finally slowing down. She gave him a space where he could breathe, relax, and simply be himself. And at that point in his life, that was exactly what he needed. At the center of everything was fatherhood. Being a father meant so much to Robin. He knew what it felt like to grow up feeling lonely, because his parents were often busy with work, so he made sure to be present for his own children. He loved them deeply and tried to give them the kind of attention and care he had once missed. But here is the truth. Even with love, family, and support, some struggles run deeper than they appear. Robin's battles were not always visible, even to those closest to him, because behind the laughter and the energy was a man still trying to find peace within himself, and that was a fight he carried till his final moments. The autopsy and hidden truths. A few months after Robin Williams passed away, the world was still trying to process the shock. The world believed Robin Williams had lost his battle with depression, but what the doctors uncovered was far more shocking and heartbreaking than anyone could have imagined. Robin was not just sad. He was suffering from severe Lewy body dementia, one of the most aggressive and misunderstood brain disorders in existence. While the world saw a man struggling with what appeared to be Parkinson's disease inside his head, a chemical storm was quietly destroying his sense of self. Doctors later described his case as one of the most extreme they had ever seen. Think about it. This was a man whose entire identity was built on his mind and fast thinking. Now, imagine that same mind being hijacked with vivid hallucinations, sudden paranoia, and a total loss of motor control. He wasn't just sick, he was becoming a prisoner inside his own body. It was really sad. Zelda Williams and his wife, Susan, later revealed that Robin was terrified. He knew something was deeply wrong, but because he had been misdiagnosed, he did not know why. He was fighting a ghost, a relentless enemy inside his own mind. The signs were there all along, subtle but real. Friends and colleagues occasionally noticed moments of hesitation, brief lapses, and flashes of confusion. Small moments that were easy to miss because Robin had spent decades mastering the art of acting. He hid his fear behind energy, improvisation, and laughter. Even as his body and mind struggled, he continued to show up. He continued to make the world laugh, and he tried to shield those he loved from the full weight of what was happening inside him. Medical experts explain that Lewy body dementia is devastating because it attacks both the mind and body. Memory, mood, movement, and even reality itself can shift without warning. For someone like Robin, whose life depended on creativity, quick thinking, and emotional connection, the disease was especially cruel. It forced him to face the slow dismantling of the very abilities that had defined him for decades. Looking back, many of the subtle struggles in his final months begin to make sense. The insomnia, the anxiety, the fleeting uncertainty. These were not isolated symptoms. They were pieces of a larger puzzle that no one fully saw at the time. Even his family later spoke about how complicated those final months had been. At the time, they were trying to support him, while also trying to understand what was happening. Only after the medical findings were released did the full picture begin to come into light. In the end, the hidden truth was not a scandal. It was a medical tragedy that had been mislabeled by the world. It was not until he was gone that we could finally see the true weight of the burden he had been carrying in silence. And perhaps this realization adds another layer to his story. The man who spent decades lifting the spirits of others had been quietly navigating his own storm, doing his best to keep going, even when things inside him were becoming harder to understand. Health struggles aside, the real legacy Robin left behind isn't in headlines or awards. It lives in the laughter he sparked, the moments he made unforgettable, and in the people who continue to carry pieces of him with them. Lasting legacies. It's been over a decade since Robin Williams passed away, yet his work still speaks for itself. Over his lifetime, he won countless awards, including an Academy Award for Good Will Hunting, multiple Emmy Awards, several Golden Globes, and even Grammys for his comedy albums. He was nominated for many more, and his influence reached far beyond any award. He left behind a legacy that feels both timeless and deeply personal. His performances were never just about making people laugh. They became moments that people connected to on a deeper level. There was always something in his work that felt real, like he was speaking directly to you. What made his impact last was not just what he did on screen, but who he was around people. Those who worked with him often talk about how he could completely change the mood of a room. In the middle of a long day on set, he would improvise, joke, and bring a kind of energy that made everyone feel lighter. He did not just perform, he created moments that people carried with them long after the cameras stopped rolling. This same presence showed up in his personal life. His daughter, Zelda Williams, has shared stories that reveal a quieter side of him. Through her memories, we see a man who valued kindness, creativity, and simply being there for the people he loved. In many ways, those small, everyday moments say just as much about him as his biggest roles. Beyond his talent, Robin's story also opened the door for more honest conversations about mental health. His willingness to speak about his struggles helped many people feel less alone. It reminded the world that even those who seem full of life can be dealing with things we cannot see. This honesty gave his life a meaning that goes far beyond awards or recognition. Today, AI technology has helped bring Robin's memories back to life. Fans are using it to create videos of him, showing his voice, his face, and his energy on social media platforms like TikTok. Some people think it's amazing, a way to see him again and remember his extraordinary work. But Zelda sees it differently. She has called these digital versions disgusting, overprocessed hot dogs because they take her father's work without the heart, the soul, and the kindness that made him so special. Here's the thing: AI can mimic his voice, copy his gestures, and even piece together his timing. But it can never truly capture the warmth in his eyes, the spark in his improvisation, or the courage and humanity he brought to every single moment. That is what made Robin unique, and it is what Zelda is fighting to protect.
The daughter of late actor Robin Williams has begged fans to stop sending her AI-generated videos of her father.
His influence continues to grow, reaching people who never had the chance to see him live. Comedians study his timing, actors watch how he inhabits characters, and young audiences discover his movies, laughing at lines that still feel fresh decades later. His legacy isn't just in the laughter he left behind. It's in the humanity, the heart, and the courage that defined him. And when we look back at the life of Robin Williams, from the shy, lonely boy growing up in Michigan to the man who captured the hearts of millions, it becomes clear that his greatest secret was not scandal, but his courage. And as you think about Robin and everything he gave us, consider which moments of his work have stayed with you the most. And knowing the private struggles he faced, does it change the way you see those moments today? Tell us your favorite Robin Williams memory in the comments below. If this story moved you or gave you a new perspective on his legacy, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. To enjoy more content like this, tap on the next video on your screen.